Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Power of a Hobby podcast. I'm your host, Don Fenton, and welcome to our next episode. So, today I have someone who actually I used to go to school with, and we've been in touch for the last couple of years now. So, Kes, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. Thanks. Good to see you once again.
Yeah, and you were having a few more conversations at the moment, which is good, and we'll look at what we do. So, Kes, if people don't know who you are, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell them what you do and what you're about?
Well, I'm Kes Shearer. I live in Essex, just near the coast, actually. And for a good few years, I've worked in education. So I predominantly deal with now additional needs learners, but I've worked a lot with young people that struggle with their behavior and so on. Most of the stuff that I've done over the past sort of 10 to 12 years has been outdoors, but I have worked in the classroom. Yeah, so mostly I deal with young people dealing with behavior issues, social issues, and so on. The work that I do is about re-engaging those young people and working with them. Yeah. So
Brilliant, brilliant. So, obviously, we have a few educators that come on this. It's always an interesting one for people to come on. And because obviously what we do, we give people, I suppose, just a platform to talk about what their hobbies are. And that doesn't happen very often. It's something we find out a lot that actually people don't get the chance to do this. So, Kes, first question I ask everyone that comes on: what does the power of a hobby mean to you?
Well, I think broadly, the power of a hobby is a kind of, I guess it sounds a bit deep, really, but it's a sort of reflection of yourself. I think, to be honest, most people that have a hobby end up within that hobby because it is sort of a bit of a true reflection of who they are, and it best represents who they are in a sense. And sometimes that kind of takes a little while to get to. But yeah, I think that's what a hobby is, really. It's that fundamentally, I think. Does that
I
make
love
sense to you?
Yeah, that does make sense. And
Yeah.
it's, I think it's the really interesting bit for me is that question. And a lot of the time we throw that in at the beginning just to almost set a scene about how the podcast is going to work, because you
Hmm.
said it is, there are a number of hobbies, or people have hobbies where actually it's who they are,
And I think it
fundamentally that
becomes
is
it,
who they are, you know.
yeah, and I think it sort of becomes a requirement because it's it sh- it goes into all of the different parts of your personality, and I think, as I say, without getting too deep into it, um, that's really what a hobby does, really.
So for those that don't know what you do, why don't you let everyone know what your hobbies are in terms of what
I
you're doing
think,
at the moment?
yeah, so I think a broad description of what I do would be bushcraft, fundamentally. It's called loads of different names, sort of outdoor living or wilderness living, or it gets a lot of titles. But fundamentally, I would say it's known best as bushcraft, I think. And I've been doing that for a number of years. Well, since I was a kid, really, fundamentally, I think. I just didn't know it at the time, and it didn't have that name. But yeah, I think now it's got a title and it's more well known by that title. And I'm lucky enough to be able to combine my hobby into my work. So I work with a company, well, a alternative education provider called Circles Farm, and have done for many years. And I'm able to use my bushcraft hobby. And I also work with a company called Let's Get Out, which is a non-for-profit organization. And there too, I'm able to use my hobby there, bushcraft, to engage young people and provide courses and all sorts of things.
Amazing. So, for those people who don't really understand what bushcraft is, why did you go into a little bit more detail about what it is, what it looks like? And again, you said actually probably as a child, how did you sort of get involved in these sort of things in the first place?
Well, good set of questions, Dom. So, what is bushcraft? Well, sort of being really sort of clinical about it. Bushcraft often gets sort of bandied about in the same breath as survival skills, and it is worth noting, in my opinion, not everybody's opinion, that is two different things. Bushcraft, the difference between bushcraft and survival, basically you are not in a voluntary situation. If you're in a survival situation, you're not in a voluntary situation. So survival skills are having the skills and the abilities to be able to deal with that situation, and is well documented by the likes of Bear Grylls and so on. Bushcraft is different. So bushcraft is about having more a harmonious approach to what's happening and being able to live and thrive in the natural environment that you put yourself in. And a good advocate of that, well, there's various advocates of that across history, really, but Ray Mears was sort of brought that to a lot of the sort of Western attention. So the sort of disciplines within that might be really are things like foraging. So being able to go into a woodland or a different environment and having a look and being able to see how you can not only find things that you can identify and potentially will feed you, but also may be medicinal to you and so on. Being able to identify trees and plants that actually you can make things out of and utilize in that kind of way. Be able to potentially track animals to be able to see them, be able to maybe learn certain things from them. That's sort of getting a bit complicated, but you can do. And then you've got kind of axe skills and knife skills, tool skills. You might even be making tools to utilize, as well as you might bring some tools with you and being able to use them safely in a remote environment, be able to read the environment so you know where you are and you know where you're going. So natural navigation may be part of that. So there's all kinds of these various different disciplines that you utilize. And sort of to answer your question about how I got into it, I don't remember it. I don't know if you remember me at school, Dom. I'm guessing you probably do. In the sense of the way I looked and so on. So I was really quite into music, and that had a profound effect on me when I was young. Also, I was really into writing, which maybe some of my school friends may not have known. And yeah, so these things had a real profound effect on me, and that's sort of reflect in my hobby now, really, because I think with you can take those things. So I can sit in the middle of nowhere, depending on what my setup is, and get a guitar out. I can sit there writing, I can and do whatever. In fact, I'm in the midst of just editing the final edits of a book which I've written, which is taking another of my interests, which is sort of philosophy, and taking sort of Eastern philosophies and then combining that with bushcraft. So that's another take on the bushcraft side of things. How I got started with it goes back to when I was a kid. I was introduced to hiking by my dad. My father was always a big hiker, used to hike all over the show. And as a young kid, when I was a sort of 7, 8, I guess, I used to sort of different stories and this, that, and the other. And one day, he was a lecturer in London College, and he came back from work. He was always doing evening classes, always home late and so on. Anyway, so my dad came home after work and basically sort of made this introduction that he was gonna go on this long walk, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to go. So 8 years old, and he said, no, it'd be too hard. It's across northern Spain. We're going to be going over mountains. We're going to be doing this, that, and the other. There's no way you can make it. And I was just like, oh no, I really want to. And he basically turned around and said, look, he didn't want to take me. He just didn't want the responsibility of a young kid, and getting himself across. He was worried about his own, abilities and whatever. And he said, I tell you what, if you do I'm going to have to do if you do all the practices, then I'll take you. Thinking, brilliant. He won't make it on the practices. And then I haven't sort of stopped him doing it, So anyway, so basically the whole of, I think every single holiday, like every single half term, every single, we found us out in the, all around in, sort of Essex and further, walking in wherever it was, etc. And which culminated in one last walk where we walked out of our front door in Ingatestone, walked to King's Lynn, and I did them all, and it was pretty harsh. And I definitely, remember like being covered in mud and being tired and whatever. But then basically he had no choice but to take me. So age of 9, off we went, to walk across Spain. And that was the first, and the connection between that and bushcraft, and I didn't really understand it at the time. But once we were there, there was, you got the sense of self-reliance. And there was times, we met this guy there called Claudio. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he was probably, apart from my dad, who was also, he was self-reliant, and he had his own kit, and we carried our own kit and everything else. But Claudio was a guy that I would sort of sit there and go, oh, I wish, I'll be next to a river and I'll go, oh, it'd be interesting to get a fish. Oh, wait a minute, Kes. And he'll go off to his pack and he'd pull his things out. And then before you knew it, we'd made a fishing rod and off we went. So that was kind of like the first kind of introduction to bushcraft. And then I went on to do that walk another 3 times, I think. So that was 500 miles ago. The last time I did it was 600 miles because I went up to the coast. And then we walked across Ireland, Southern Ireland, from Dublin to Gaelic, which was 300 miles. And that was all wild camping every day. It took us about a month in the rain, and it rained every day. Like it was proper. But yeah, so that was sort of my introduction to bushcraft and that kind of world, I guess. Yeah, so that's how it all started, really.
It's
And then
amazing.
from then, yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's amazing how a lot of these sort of things we get introduced to as kids.
Mm.
What it is amazing is how many people probably hear me say this on every podcast. The amount of things that we start as children, but then we get older and think we shouldn't continue to do it for whatever reason. Oh, it's a child's activity, or it's this, or we have to now be adults, or we have to be in this other world. It's amazing how many people get lost in the fact they can't continue these sort of things, especially when,
Mm.
by the sounds of it, the amount of life skills that you've learned and the experiences you've learned just from those in itself.
Oh, totally. I mean, those experiences shaped me as a person. There's no
Mm.
doubt about it. And the thing is, as well, it gave me the tools to then go on to teach others, uh, and to deal with others. And it's sort of way of living, that's sort of where, yeah. So, I don't want to get too dramatic about it, but it gives you a sense of self, and it gives you a sense, sort of oneness. You're in,
Mm.
and there's no doubt that when I'm dealing with young people, my biggest tool is the environment. And one thing I would like to say also about that is that we were pretty poor. We weren't well off, and it sounds so very dramatic. Oh, we spent the whole summer in Spain, but we had to hitch to get there. So we walked out of our front door, walked to the A12 and started hitching. We didn't have any money, so people don't hitch anymore, but we hitched from there. We hitched to the coast. We got on a ferry, got off the ferry. We started hitching again, and we hitched to the Pyrenees, and then we started walking. So this is something that I'd really like to get across, because you hear about certain hobbies, and when you begin to look at them, start seeing the pound signs, because you kind of think, oh, well, hang on a second, I've got to buy myself a pair of skis, and I've got to buy myself a, I don't know, pink flamingo for that, and I've got to buy, you start thinking, well, I can't afford to do that. But bushcraft, you can do. You can walk into get yourself a little book about trees from a charity shop, and walk into the forest, walk into the woods, and start having a look. start learning a few things. That's that that's the beauty of it. You don't need expensive kit and equipment. You can spend a lot of money on kit and equipment, believe me, but you don't need it. You don't need it. And part of the beauty of bushcraft, when you get to the essence of it, is that knowledge is really long. You don't. It's not. It weighs nothing. So that's what you want with you. You know, you don't have to do it like that. Again, each to their own. But having giving yourself the opportunity to not have a lot and be in a place and think, yeah, I can look after myself, is an important thing, and it's an empowering thing.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I love hearing how they get into things and how it molds them and how they go on from there. In terms of, obviously, you said you were sort of Pyrenees, Southern Ireland. Where else have you been where you've been involved in these sort of things?
Well,
Have there been other parts of the world that you've gone to that when you look back, as if you imagine getting involved in these sort of things as a child,
yeah.
we don't always go, oh, actually, I'm going to get into this because I can travel around the world and I can do this. There's going to be trees certain places around the world, and I want to go and look at them, and I want to go and do all of this. Where else is this sort of taking you?
Well, you certainly can, and there's lots of places I want to go,
Mm.
without a doubt. But I think it's important to say that there's a lot of places on our doorstep. That I would like to make that point. I've got a list as long as your arm of places that I'd love to do bushcraft in, and I'm sure at some point or another I will. But what I would say is that, yeah, you can go to your own close environments, and you don't have to travel far. This is quite an interesting country. I've milled about various different areas. Certainly after lockdown, I wanted to get out and about, and I did a real tour of Britain in a way. But Scotland is amazing, and it's not far. I mean,
Mm.
after lockdown, I literally just I sort of said to my family, I'm just going for a drive. I can't. Um, and they were, yeah, my very forgiving other half. She said that, okay, gave me that blessing, and I just drove to Scotland. It takes you a day. This is not a huge place, and once you get there, it's very different. I did. As I say, I've been sort of practicing what's known as bushcraft for a long time. One thing I did do, I sort of thought to myself, well, how can I make this official? Because you've got experience and so on. But in the sort of society that we live in, sometimes experience is not enough, and people want little bits of paper. And you can get qualifications. And I was really surprised. I was like, well, can you get qualifications for that kind of thing? You can get recognized qualifications. And that was one of the things I did. I went for a brilliant company called Survival School, and an amazing guy called Johnny Crockett, which sounds very bushcraft indeed, but he's a lovely guy. And I went and got sort of qualified, and part of that qualification was I had to do 5 days in the Highlands, where they try and as best they can kind of get you to show that you have certain skills. They sort of put it under the assessment as such in that environment, but also kind of leave you alone to show that you can do those things.
Mm.
So, and that was an amazing experience. And so there's places out there, Scotland is a really good place to go and sort of mill about, but all your own backyard. The skills can be practiced anywhere. You can find yourself a little space in your garden and practice some firelighting skills and some and some carving skills and so on. It's very accessible.
Yeah, yeah. How do I put it? What's your sort of 18-month plan around what you're going to do with bushcraft? Obviously, I know you work within that environment as well now, but have you got, when you said you went on a little mini tour of Britain after COVID, have you got
Mhm.
any? What's your sort of plans over the next 18 months, couple of years around your hobby? Have you got any places you want to go, or have you got what's the sort of next step for you at the moment?
I think because work takes so much of my time, in all honesty, but I'm lucky enough to kind of embed my
Mm.
hobby within that work. So I can kind of practice various different things through that. I mentioned about the book, and the difficulty with that is that the work has really dominated my time and not allowed me to be able to finish that. And it's literally like almost pressing a button on that. I'll self-publish that, and so actually, I think a part of something that I'd really like to get done would be to get the book out there and show this correlation between sort of that sort of Eastern philosophy and Taoist practices and philosophies and the bushcraft practices, and sort of make something of that. And because that's a kind of that can be a way of living. And so it'll be good to sort of get that out there and have people see that. The places that I work as well, doing big things in regard to their provisions. So Let's Get Outdoors, Let's Get Out is expanding their provision, and we do a lot of funded work and so on. So that's that's keeping me really busy. And of course, the stuff that Circles Farm does every day for young people that can't access full-time mainstream school is is a lot as well. But outside of that, so because there's these disciplines within bushcraft, it's just a constant learning curve, and every single one of those, whether you were talking about shelters and foraging and axe work and knife work and tracking and navigation and all of these different, every single one of them is a rabbit hole. And it's just, you never stop learning. You're constantly learning. Even a practice, firelighting is huge, and even a simple practice, you can change the way that you do it. You can, so consistently learning those skills in different environments in the next 18 months is, in the next 18 years.
Yeah. It's just one continual thing, isn't it?
Without a doubt. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So, last question. So, if one of your, let's put it this way, if one of your young people came up to you and went, do they call you sir or do they call you Kes? How do they?
They call me all sorts, Dom.
Well, let's call you Kes for now. Let's do it politely and call you Kes for now. So, if they come up and went, Kes, look, I really want a hobby, but I don't know where to start, what would you say to them?
I'd say there's a lot of good people out there. Contrary to popular belief, everybody sort of thinks, people are quite insular, nowadays. But actually, once you start getting to talk to people, there's so many good people. So talk to people, go out and have a chat with people about what they do, like you're doing on your podcast. The internet is a wealth of information, so it's at your fingertips. Things are at your fingertips. That we've never lived in a time of more abundance of information. It's not necessarily a good thing sometimes, but people have knowledge, so go and speak to people. People want to help. People want to, all of the people that you have on your podcast, and the people that I meet and the people that you meet, there's a constant in that where people are wanting to help other people, wanting to communicate with other people. So you can get talking to people. People want to teach you, people want to share their knowledge and experience and so on. So if you want to do a hobby, don't be frightened to go and chat to someone about what they're doing, because they'll welcome you in. That's how things work.
Yeah, no, absolutely love that. Where can people find out more about you? Where can people make contact with you?
I think the easiest thing probably is just to find me on Facebook. I'm easily found, Kes Shearer. So find me there, and then we can find you can find where I work and the things that I'm doing and so on, and then connect with all of that. through that. And yeah, as I say, I will put out, once I've finally done the edit on the book, I'll put a thing out for that as well. So that will all be connected to the Facebook as well. Yeah, so that's probably the easiest. Get in touch with you and then find me as well.
And then I can pass them on. It'll be fine.
Yeah, 100%. That's part of what you do, Dom, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that is part of what I do. That's why my business is what it's called. So it's fine. Kes, thank you very much for coming on board. It's great to have a conversation. I've found out a lot more that I now know that I didn't know beforehand. So thank you for giving us your time. Thank you everyone for tuning in, whether you're on YouTube or Spotify or iTunes. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Take care now. Bye.